The Grim Anatomy is one of the least well known but also most fascinating finds in all of the Dragon Age universe. The name itself was given to a set of manuscripts that were unearthed during an expedition organized by the University of Orlais into the Western Approach, when they discovered a weird combination of pages and symbols that seemed to be from a man studying animals in the universe, including nugs, giants, and wyverns, and what they looked like deep inside their bodies. Probably over 800 years old and created during the time of the Second Blight, the manuscript is ancient in origin and seems to try to unearth the secrets of something sinister. Where it gets really creepy though is that many pages are full of strange and unrecognizable symbols and scripts that no one in the Dragon Age universe up to this point has been able to decipher. Largely thought to be inspired by the real-world Voyage manuscripts or Gray's Anatomy book, the Grim Anatomy is a dive into the autonomy of different animals in Dragon Age, with many pages delving into the eyes and souls of different animals. One passage even recounts tearing an eye from a giant skull, after which the mystery writer exclaims, "If the eye is the window through which it crawls, then where in the skull does it hide?" What is especially unnerving though is the author's unorthodox methods for investigating these animals, with many dissection techniques that modern scholars of Orlais University see as barbaric. This can be seen on multiple pages full of mutilated corpses and fractured bones that show whoever was taking these notes was especially gruesome in their approach. And as you slowly unwind each page in the manuscripts, the writing becomes more and more incoherent, with increasingly twisted and evil drawings and techniques being put on display, until by the final pages there's nothing left but strange symbols and torn apart pages, implying that someone else or something else has tried to hide away some of the work being done in this book. It's widely theorized that this something could be a demon itself, considering that the ramblings in the manuscript are most likely a broad and extensive study of demonic possession in animals in the Dragon Age universe, with some especially prominent entries noting things like, "It's not wearing the creature's skin. It has become the creature. Its mind, its sense, its blood." So could it be that the Grim Anatomy manuscripts are actually the look into a sick and twisted man as he descends into madness, trying to study the effects of demonic possession on life, only to become possessed himself? Some in the community have even begun to wonder if the Grim Anatomy could actually be a collection of notes from one of the 7 Tevinter Magisters trying to uncorrupt themselves after returning from the Fade as monsters, or the Architect looking to a side project to help propel the Darkspawn into true domination and rule. Both things will delve into much more detail later on this list. And furthermore, even some have pointed out that the writing style in the manuscript actually very closely resembles many Dwarven texts and novels, which could be a clue to its real origin. But either way, something very, very wrong is going on with this manuscript, with so many strange passages and bumbling writing, along with some entries that depict animals and creatures that have never before been seen in the Dragon Age universe. Another passage holds a strange string of weird lines and dots that almost resembles Braille, something I hope some more theorists in the Dragon Age community look into to hopefully shed some more light on the meaning of them. Could it be that the Grim Anatomy actually holds the key to unlocking the secrets behind the demons in the universe and how they use blood and souls to tap into and tarnish our human realm of existence? And if it does, it seems to imply the demons and monsters beyond the Fade and their ability to alter the blood and reality of living creatures is even more drastic than we previously thought, and could have far-reaching implications on the world of Dragon Age and its now decorated past. And by the way, make sure to check out a lot of these other creators I mentioned along on this list, like Gil. They have some really great in-depth Dragon Age knowledge, and it's where I learned a lot for this video, and I'm sure you guys will enjoy it as well. While the 4 main races in Thedas are commonly seen as the humans, elves, dwarves, and Kunari, there actually have been a handful of other less prominent creatures and civilizations that have roamed the lands over multiple millennia. And potentially one of the least well-known and also the most interesting of all of these races is the highly mysterious and controversial group of lizardmen called the Scaled Ones. Said to have waged war with the dwarves sometime after the founding of the Tevinter Imperium in -1200 Ancient, the Scaled Ones have never been seen since, and this has led most scholars across Thedas to write them off as a folktale entirely. Described as massive humanoids in form, the Scaled Ones were said to be separated between the male warriors with large talons and hardened scales, and the female priestesses that would don colorful and vibrant robes, while also having the ability to breathe fire from their nostrils and mouth. The race used a still unknown language and form of communication to quickly command actions across the battlefield, and were said to be a massive problem for sets of Dwarven soldiers to handle deep underground. They followed a strict religious doctrine that involved them creating massive golden altars in the middle of the forest that were shaped like fire, where they would drag dead bodies of their foes, drain them of their blood, and perform demonic rituals of presumably blood magic that connected the Scaled Ones with the elusive realm of the Fade. Scholars in the universe to this day still argue over how intelligent this species really was, with some saying they were amongst the beasts themselves, while others argue that there were clear signs of culture. Where this starts to get extremely interesting though is one entry from the Chronicles of the Forgotten War series books and game, where one dwarf recounts witnessing an unbelievable event take place with the Scaled Ones. A robed Scaled One stood before the altar. Its voice was different from the others, softer, almost feminine. It changed and raised a basin of blood towards the altar, and the other Scaled Ones bowed. The robed Scaled One produced fire from its palm and mouth and ignited the blood. I readied my ace for blood and steeled myself for the sight of the altar, but it wasn't there. The camp, Father and Drog, the Scaled Ones, all gone. Only the basin remained, charred around the edges. This passage seems to imply that the Scaled Ones were performing blood rituals in a sort of attempt to leave the material world and join with powerful demons, or some other event we aren't yet aware of. It actually almost reminds me of the Dwemer in the Elder Scrolls series, another iceberg I made a while back I think you guys would also enjoy, but as to what actually happens to these elusive Scaled Ones, there isn't much to go off of other than this, meaning much of their history is still shrouded in mystique and is still up for interpretation for just how much of it is actually even real in the first place. Where this theory starts to get absolutely unbelievable though, is the real world connection between the Scaled Ones and a horrific event in our real world. Because you see, the original writer for the Scaled Ones lore entries at Bioware was let go a couple of years back because of a connection with a largely unknown satanic worshipping cult called the Scaled Blood Pack, based in Southern California. The cult was indicted on multiple human kidnapping and experimentation cases where they would capture helpless victims at night and experiment on them by attaching reptilian scales from turtles and lizards to human skin in order to build an army of Illuminati lizard men to take over the... I'm just messing with you guys. But by the way, the Scaled Ones really do exist in Dragon Age and could even potentially be a massive and hidden foe that is sneaking and waiting in the shadows to one day come back and wreak havoc on the world, similar to the Darkspawn. The world of Dragon Age is marked by many tremendous moments in history and lore, but as in our own real world, not every region or peoples in the universe agree on when and what exactly has occurred in its long and storied past. This exacerbates the issue of figuring out what really has occurred in the lands of Thedas, the map we play on in-game for those of you who don't know, and one place we can see this more prominently than most is the calendars that are used by the citizens across the lands. By far the most commonly used amongst these calendars in Thedas is the Chantry calendar, which is the main source of timekeeping in every region outside of Tevinter itself, and this calendar marks each age in 100-year spans that now cover over a millennia, which coincidentally, for those of you that don't know, is why the series is called Dragon Age in the first place, because in-game we play during what is called the Dragon Age of the Chantry calendar, marked by the discovery of dragons existing even after they were presumed extinct up to that point. The Chantry in Dragon Age are a powerful religious force that follow the Chant of Light religion, that believes in a creator god known as the Maker. But even with all this power, influence, and knowledge, the Tevinter Imperium has their own calendar as well that dates back even 1,000 years prior to the Chantries. But by far the most interesting calendar of all is the now mostly forgotten and forbidden Ancient Elven calendar. The reason for this is because it marks many important moments in the history of the Dragon Age universe dating back over 8,000 years ago, and holds potentially some of the biggest secrets to some of the long-lost forgotten races and fields of magic, many of which in modern times are now banned or removed from history textbooks to stop rumors from spreading. You see, back in the ancient lands of Thedas, there were no humans or Chronari. Rather, the continent was made up of three primary races: the Dwarves underground, the Titans on ground, and the Elves above the sky in floating cities. And most interestingly, the ancient elves, known as the Elven, were said to have lived in a world without boundaries. In Thedas, we know from the games the lands are made up of two regions: the material world you see on this map, and the ephemeral and twisted world of the Fade, which is home to magic and a completely foreign laws to nature, separated from the material world by a field known as the Veil. Side note, by the way, magic and otherworldly presences in the series is actually the result of some of the mages gaining power from beyond the Veil in the Fade at great risk to themselves. But in the time of the ancient elves, things were different. Instead, the material world and the Fade were as one, and the elves were able to communicate with and channel the power of magic freely. This led the elves to waging a war with the Titans and eventually defeating them, mining their bodies which contain the Lyrium minerals we see all over Thedas in-game. This victory marked the creation of the elven megacity and capital Arlathon, and the beginning of the elven calendar along with so many other mysteries. And so it's these mysteries that make the elven calendar so interesting. Tales of enormous and magical deities that roam the lands. Huge events explained like the forming of the Evernuris, which was 9 elven self-proclaimed gods that led the Elven in their victory over the Titans. This group of leaders was then said to have waged war with one another, hungry for power, until that cycle was finally broken by an event we will speak about much later on this list. However, what really makes the Elven calendar so memorable is that all of these recorded events are in many ways in modern Chantry times now seen as nothing more than hearsay, with even the modern day Dalish or Elvish peoples of Thedas seeing many of their old customs as false tales of grandeur. So how much of what the Elvish calendar describes is real then? Did the ancient elves really have full control and power over the Veil? Were the Titans defeated single-handedly by them with no other outside forces? And even more so, the calendar also gives dates and explanations for other big events, like when the Elven and Dwarves first met. In many ways, this ancient calendar is our best first-hand account of what Thedas was actually like millennia ago, and serves as the main source of knowledge of the past upon which the characters in the game have built. More than potentially any other calendars or documents in game, the Elven historical markers may paint some of the backstory for some of the most riveting and mind-altering lore in all of Dragon Age, and lots of players might not even know about it. While nowadays in the Dragon Age games, most of proper civilization and power is focused in the hands of humanity, with elves and dwarves seeing a secondary role, the question of how humans even came to the lands of Thedas in the first place and established such a stronghold is still shrouded in a lot of mystery. We know that at some point humanity arrived to the north near the Tevinter Imperium, sailing on an armada of large ships carrying at the time one massive nomadic tribe of humans known as the Neorominians. The leading theory is that the first human clan originated from the close northern island of Parvolan, and this is corroborated by 2 main pieces of evidence. First of all, modern-day expeditions to Parvolan have uncovered massive pyramids and other human-made structures deep in the rainforests of the island. And even more incriminating, many documents of the ancient Elven lore and now Dalish customs claim explicitly that this is exactly where humanity stemmed from. And after all, we do know from both Elven and Dwarven lore stemming back thousands of years that both the civilizations lived on Thedas without humans at some point. So the Elven knowing where humanity came from would in theory make sense. The issue is we already know ancient Dalish or Elven lore is in many cases very unreliable, and it's hard to decipher what is truth from fiction. What we do know is that after these first humans arrived in Thedas, they quickly started to gain power and war with their neighboring elves. That is, until the modern day Thedas we play in the games, where humanity has now garnered control of the entire continent, splitting into 7 different realms of power and influence ruled over by humanity. The Androfels to the northwest, the mage societies of the Tevinter Imperium and the original landing spot for humanity, the northeastern kingdoms of Adiva and Ravain, the more sporadic strongholds of Nevera and the Free Marches, and the affluent yet distinct zones of Orlais and Ferelden. By the way, for anyone who's interested, Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2 take place mostly in Ferelden, and Dragon Age Inquisition covers primarily the zones between Orlais, Ferelden, and the Free Marches. The newly announced sequel, Dragon Age Dreadwolf, is rumored to be set in the Tevinter Imperium. However, it's still the origins for humanity that are the cause for so much rumor and speculation. Some Elven texts even argue that humanity was actually first born on Seheron, and only migrated to Parvolan after which they made landfall on Thedas. But even crazier theories argue maybe humanity actually comes from somewhere much further, and much more unknown. As to what these lands would actually be like, it's hard to say, as nothing beyond the standard maps of Thedas has been extensively explored due to vast oceans and treacherous conditions. But even crazier theories yet that we can speculate on may paint an even more gruesome picture. It's widely documented that early humans on the continent of Thedas in the Tevinter Imperium worshipped the Old Gods, which were said to be dragon lords. And we also know that humans can consume dragon blood, and it changes them but keeps them alive, implying that maybe humanity's origins actually come from the dragon Old Gods as slaves to their will. After all, it seems that the main reason that humanity was able to beat the Elven in warfare so quickly was because of the magic the Old Gods had taught them. Another plausible explanation in a similar vein is Mythal. Mythal was one of the original Elven Evanuris, who was said to have taken down a Titan all on her own, but we also know she had a huge interest in early humanity for some reason. Many ancient lore texts argue that the Elven of old would experiment and concoct many strange new species and monsters in their pursuit of control of the world, and humanity could have somehow originally stemmed from these experiments, being subjugated in Elven rule, which was written out of the history books in a shame for their past. Questions as to what humanity's origins are get even weirder when we look at the Kunari, who are also said to have sailed from some northern land. One prominent Chantry scholar who studied geography even argued there must be other lands, continents or islands, perhaps across Amaranthine or north of Parvolan, for the Kunari arrived in Thedas from somewhere, but beyond that deduction, we know nothing. So it seems likely that there's lots of mysteries and important things happening outside of the continent of Thedas itself. And as to what lies in the north, it may just be the key to understanding what exactly the ancient history of the world is. Because the humans, elves, and dwarves alike all have their own tales, but it is only by actually venturing into the unknown lands that we could learn more. One of the most thought-provoking and interesting riddles in all of Dragon Age, and potentially one we will learn more about in Dreadwolf, seeing as it's situated closer to the north. Probably the most terrifying foe and force we have gone up against in the Dragon Age series so far is the Darkspawn. Introduced in Dragon Age Origins, Darkspawn are heinous monstrosities that live deep underground and periodically surface to try and put an end to the world, led by a song and will of the Old Gods that drives their thirst for bloodshed, known as the Taint. The way they do this is first by discovering an old god deep underground and tainting the dragon with their blood in order to turn it into an archdemon, which then leads the never-ending horde of Darkspawn to the surface world to create chaos. For some more background on this too, the ancient humans that originally migrated to the Tevinter Imperium worshipped the Maker, or god of the now Chantry's religion, and it is taught that the old gods were banished underground by the Maker for disobeying their commands. And in this society of Tevinter, there were 7 high magistrates of powerful mages, each representing one of the 7 old gods or dragons. But on one fateful day, these 7 magisters combined their powers and teleported themselves into the Fade, something humanity had never done before, and in their own hubris, they were transformed into diseased and mindless monsters, the first of the Darkspawn. And when they arrived back to Thedas, they spread this plague to many others and created hordes of Darkspawn now led by the first released old god, Dumat. This event was known as the First Blight, and as with all others preceding it, it led to years and years of horrific bloodshed and death, with the skies blackened and storming nonstop. All human civilizations on Thedas had to band together in order to finally slay the dragon and put an end to the Blight. And since then, there have been 4 more Blights, with the 5th taking place during the events of Dragon Age Origins, and none happening since, because in Dragon Age Inquisition, we fight demons, not Darkspawn. Where the interesting theories start to come in though, is what exactly is going to happen once there is no longer any Blights. Currently, the Darkspawn are still living deep underground beneath Thedas, after their last defeat, and are constantly looking for one of the 2 remaining old gods' bodies in order to taint and release the new archdemon. But what exactly would happen if the Darkspawn succeeded in doing so, and these next 2 Blights end up being stopped as well? Some in the community have begun to speculate that this could actually lead to catastrophe, seeing the 7 old gods as a sort of seal and protection for the world. Could it be that by slaying all of the archdemons, and thus all of the old gods, humanity would actually be dooming themselves to an even more hellish existence? Potentially these old gods are in some way holding back a more sinister foe, either the Evanuris in conjunction with the Veil, or maybe the ancient and long-forgotten Titans that once warred with the god Elven. Maybe the very thing that humanity fears most, that being the Darkspawn and their Blight invasions, is actually somehow their salvation. We already know that the world of Thedas is hiding a lot more secrets than meets the eye, and potentially these old gods deep underground are the only things standing between us and something much, much scarier. Only time will tell though, as it's usually centuries between each Darkspawn invasion, and seeing as the amount of old gods left is dwindling, it will be harder and harder for them to find one. While most of the Dragon Age discussions seem to revolve around the humans, and especially the elves, potentially the most interesting race, the dwarves, are hiding what seems to be some of the best lore and theories in the whole series. Rumored to have been birthed from the Titans themselves, the ancient dwarves of old are now shrouded in mystery as to what exactly they even were. But what is known is that the ancient dwarves were extremely powerful and formidable beings. At some point after the fall of the Titans, likely due to the Evanuris or Elven gods, the Dwarven race somehow fell with them, and deep underground started to construct what are called the Taigs or Dwarven settlements beneath the surface. With the fall of the Titans too, their blood tainted the rocks, and from it the dwarves found control over Illyrium, and from that grew an unrelenting resistance to magic. And by the way, this was also the reason they eventually were able to ally with the Tevinter Empyrean humans, as the mages needed access to more Illyrium to pull magic from the Fade. And as more and more of these Taigs started to crop up at different spots underground, the dwarves began to band together into one Dwarven empire with its capital at Kal Shirak. The capital many years later was moved to Orzammar instead, but nonetheless, these forgotten capitals and Taigs now litter the underground portions of Thedas, some with terrifying backstories and lore of crazy creatures and horrific events involved with many, while others are completely now forgotten to the winds of time. And in order to connect these Taigs and massive underground capitals, the dwarves constructed a sprawling underground network of highways called the Deep Roads. These massive sections of underground caverns stretch for miles and miles throughout the darkest and most horrifying depths of Thedas, and are also the original spot where many dwarves first encountered the Darkspawn. Because you see, during the starting stages of the First Blight, many travelers and caravans on the Deep Roads started to disappear, along with guard patrols sent to find them, and rumors of shadowy beings and blood-curdling screams began to sweep the Dwarven mindshare. It turned out these disappearances were in fact due to the Darkspawn, coming from deep underground, and this First Blight is actually what resulted in the Dwarven race itself being as weak as they are now in the games as we see them, as they lost almost all of their Taigs and capitals to non-stop warfare with the beasts, holding on only due to their ingenuity in crafting, forging, and building. If humanity and elves thought they had it bad on the surface, it was only 10 times worse for the dwarves underground. But just because the modern day dwarves are so much weaker and now less expansive, does not mean that they do not have a rich and storied history in their past with the most extensive writing of any race, writings that we'll dive into deeper on this list. For the Deep Roads specifically though, the thing that made the dwarves so notable and powerful in the first place, some in the community have begun to wonder whether or not the dwarves we know of today even constructed them. We know from many lore entries in game that the dwarves of these primeval and ancient Taigs were said to have worshipped strange characters and beings that gave them immense power after the fall of the Titans. One of the most notable examples of this comes from an ancient report found in the Royal Archives of Orzammar that reads, "Your Majesty, it's difficult getting a straight answer out of the scavenger. These sods get themselves so blighted they can't think straight, much less spit in their own mouths. He says, however, that he's gone down into the parts of the Deep Roads that are so old that our people forgot them long before the Blight even happened. He spoke of great statues and temples. Temples! He spoke of things that could only have been made of magic and of impossible ruins untouched by the Darkspawn. He described creatures the likes of which we've never seen. None of it's possible, of course, but V conferred with the Shaper and he says the memories date back to the founding of the first Taig. What could have been before that? Yes, we're unable to explore those depths the scavenger spoke of because of the Darkspawn, but surely the memories would speak of such places if they existed. Yet, in the scavenger's belongings, amidst all the filth, there was a single idol. It was clearly of dwarven make, but not resembling any paragon on record. The idol was dressed in a manner I've never seen. The Shaper of memories also could not identify the substance from which it was made. The thought that the memories might be wrong is unsettling. Could it be that these strange beings are something we have never seen before, or perhaps a being that we are well aware of like the Evanuris or the Magistrates? Potentially, most of the deep roads may actually have been constructed before the dwarves started their great taigas underground, and it was only after communicating with these beings that they were able to add on to them and take control of the underground. If this is the case, though, then what is it that the dwarves stumbled upon that gave them so much power? Surely deep underground there are more dwarven archives and ruins that can be found in lost taigas, and it could also hold the key to a force in Dragon Age that we aren't yet aware of yet, that could be harnessing some of the most immense power and knowledge we have ever seen. Either way, it's crazy to think that while most of the series in the games takes place on land, there's also an entire network of advanced and long-lost civilizations right beneath our feet that hold the keys to the deepest and darkest mysteries in the entire series.